Why was everyone staring when she stepped off that truck? Because she wasn't supposed to be there. The Iron Ridge training facility simmered under a merciless Arizona sun, a place where weakness melted away like heat off asphalt. The kind of place that didn't care who you were, what you'd done, or how many battles you'd already survived. Here, everyone started from zero. Dust devils danced across the shooting range, swirling between 20 recruits standing at rigid attention. Sweat beaded on brows, rifles gleamed, and the air smelled of iron, oil, and fear. Then came the voice, sharp, old, and edged like broken glass. "Welcome to Hell Week, ladies and gentlemen. By Friday, half of you will be gone. The other half will wish you were." Sergeant Mason, 30 years in the Corps, his face carved by sun and loss. A man who believed pain was the only honest teacher left in the world. He moved like a predator, circling, searching for weakness. And then the truck. A military transport rolled in, kicking up a thick amber cloud. Everyone turned, just slightly, curiosity breaking discipline. The driver stepped down, then opened the back. Out climbed a woman. Medium height, standard issue BDUs. Brown hair pulled back tight into a regulation bun. She carried her duffel with practiced ease, not nervous, not arrogant, just deliberate. Mason scowled before she even spoke. He checked his clipboard, irritation deepening the lines around his eyes. "Private Caroline Hayes, you're 3 days late to my course." She stopped in front of him with perfect posture. "Private Hayes reporting for advanced tactical training, Sergeant. My apologies for the delay." A few of the men exchanged glances, grins half hidden, whispers carried on dry wind. Mason's voice turned cold. 3 days late means 3 days behind. Care to explain why?" "Critical mission parameters, Sergeant. Documentation was forwarded to command." That word, mission, made a few recruits snicker. Behind them, one voice cut through. "Looks like they're sending college girls to play soldier now." Corporal Rodriguez, Ranger tab on his shoulder, arrogance in his smirk. 3 tour under his belt, 1 under his ego. Mason's expression hardened. "Since you're so special, Hayes, maybe you'd like to demonstrate what Fort Benning thought was so important." He gestured toward the firing range. "M2010 enhanced sniper rifle. Show us what you've got." The rifle was long, heavy, built for stronger hands. Hayes took it calmly, no hesitation, just quiet acceptance. The recruits whispered bets under their breath. "Target at 400 meters, 5 rounds." She settled into position, slow, mechanical. Her breathing steady but restrained, almost too careful. Then came the shot. It went wide. Laughter burst through the ranks. Mason's jaw clenched. Again. 4 more shots, none hit center, 1 didn't even touch the target. The laughter grew. Rodriguez muttered, "Guess Barbie forgot her aim." Mason's disgust cut through the noise. "Did they even bother checking if you could shoot before they sent you here?" Hayes rose, her face expressionless. "Still adjusting to the weapon, Sergeant." Mason shook his head. "It's the operator that's the problem." He turned to Rodriguez. "Let's see what a real marksman looks like." Rodriguez stepped forward, full of swagger, took position and fired 5 quick rounds. All perfect. That, Private Hayes, is what we expect at Iron Ridge. Fall in with the others. Try not to embarrass yourself again. Hayes moved back into formation silently. Rodriguez leaned close enough for only her to hear. "I think target, running a sale on dolls, might be more your speed." She didn't look at him, didn't flinch. But her eyes, those calm, green eyes, flickered. Something alive moved behind them, cold and calculating. Staff Sergeant Wallace, an older man watching from the shadows near the tower, noticed it. He noticed everything. The duffel she carried, the deliberate way she missed her first 5 shots, the quiet control in her breathing. He'd seen that kind of composure before in places Iron Ridge recruits couldn't even imagine. That night the desert wind howled against the barracks. The recruits collapsed in exhaustion, all except Hayes. She sat alone on her bunk, field stripping her weapon with machine-like precision. No wasted movement, no sound but the soft click of metal. Specialist Torres, one of the few who hadn't mocked her, approached. "Don't mind Rodriguez. He's got a chip on his shoulder the size of Texas." Hayes didn't look up. "I've met his type before." "Sergeant Mason's tough but fair," Torres continued. "Once he sees you can pull your weight." "I'm not worried about Mason." Her hands paused just for a fraction, a tiny human hesitation, then continued working, reassembling the rifle with perfect efficiency. Torres frowned. "You handle that like you've done it 1,000 times." Hayes smiled faintly. "Basic training, they drill it into you." "Not like that, they don't." Before Hayes could answer, the door swung open. Rodriguez and 2 other recruits entered, laughter thick in their voices. "Telling war stories, ladies. Let me guess, Private Hayes here was top of her class at mall security." They laughed. Hayes ignored them, methodically sliding the bolt back into place. Rodriguez's smirk faded when she didn't react. He stepped closer. "Maybe you'd fit better in the kitchen. I hear they need someone to make sandwiches." Hayes looked up slowly, just one look. Cold still, unflinching. It made Rodriguez step back before he even realized he was doing it. Torres whispered after he left, "He's the best shooter in the program. 3 confirmed kills in Kandahar." Hayes reassembled the rifle, her voice quiet. "Everyone's good at something." The next morning, the punishment began. 2-mile runs in full gear, obstacle courses designed to break body and spirit. Hayes kept up barely, always in the middle. Never the worst, never the best. Her performance was ordinary, forgettable. And Mason noticed. He didn't like what he couldn't define. "Move your ass, Hayes. My dead grandmother runs faster than you." During a stairwell-clearing drill, Rodriguez accidentally shouldered past her. "Oops, didn't see you there, Tiny." Hayes stumbled, recovered, kept going. Didn't complain, didn't look back. By day's end, most recruits were half dead on their bunks, but Hayes sat upright, reading field manuals under a flickering bulb. When Mason appeared in the doorway, silence fell like a knife. "Hayes, Colonel Hartman's office, now." Whispers followed her out the door. "She's getting booted. Told you she wouldn't last a week." But Wallace, watching from the shadows again, smiled faintly. He spoke quietly into his radio. "She's on her way, just as expected." Colonel Hartman's office was a museum of silence. No medals, no photos, just maps. Silver-haired, blue-eyed, carved from command itself, he didn't look up when she entered. "3 days late to my training facility." "Yes, sir. I apologize for the delay." "Mason says you're underperforming, says you're a waste of a slot." "I'm still adapting to the environment, sir." Hartman's eyes lifted, sharp as a scalpel. "But that's not why you're here." He slid a folder across the desk. "Tomorrow we have visitors. Congressman Miller and his staff. They oversee funding for elite programs like this one. You'll be participating in the demonstration." Hayes blinked once, the first hint of emotion since she'd arrived. "Sir." "Staff Sergeant Wallace will brief you at 500. Dismissed." Outside the office, Mason waited. His expression was thunder. What was that about? "Special assignment for tomorrow's demonstration." "What special assignment?" "Staff Sergeant Wallace will brief me, Sergeant." Mason stepped close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath. "Listen carefully, Hayes. This is my program. You embarrass me tomorrow in front of the brass and I understand, Sergeant." He searched her face for any sign of defiance, found none. 4:30, my office before Wallace. Understood. "Yes, Sergeant." That night she didn't sleep. At 4:30, she stood in Mason's office, punctual, precise, unreadable. He glared over his mug. "Whatever Wallace tells you, you clear it with me first." "Yes, Sergeant." "Good, dismissed." She turned and stepped into the desert dawn. The sun climbed slow and gold over Iron Ridge as she approached Range Echo, a private field tucked behind the western hills. Staff Sergeant Wallace was waiting alone, beside a rifle case. No salute, no formality, just a faint knowing smile. "Right on time," he said. "Close the gate behind you." She did, then stood still. "Colonel Hartman has questions about you." "Yes, sir." He opened the case. Inside, a weapon different from anything in the standard racks. A custom sniper rifle, fine-tuned and silent as a breath. "Show me what you can do," Wallace said. "Real targets 600 meters." Hayes hesitated only for a second, then took the rifle. And something shifted. The hesitation vanished. The stiffness melted away. Every movement, stance, breath, adjustment became effortless, natural, perfect. 5 shots cracked through the dawn. 5 perfect hits. Wallace lowered his binoculars, a small smile ghosting across his weathered face. "The scope's pulling right." 2 millimeters at this distance," Hayes replied softly. Silence stretched between them, the kind of silence where truth hides. Finally, Wallace spoke. "How long were you planning to keep up the act?" Hayes's face stayed calm. "That depends on the mission parameters, sir." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Your transfer wasn't delayed, was it?" "No, sir." "You're not here to learn." "I'm here to observe, sir." Wallace's voice softened, respectful now. "For tomorrow's demonstration, position 3, 800 meters. Hit center mass, not the head." "Why?" "We're not showing all our cards yet, private." She nodded once, professional, silent. As she turned to leave, the wind caught her hair. The desert light hit the faint edge of something glinting under her collar, a small, silver emblem. Wallace saw it just before she tucked it back beneath her shirt. An elite sniper's medal. And though no one else at Iron Ridge knew it yet. Tomorrow, the woman they mocked would make history. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why was the desert so quiet that morning? Because something was about to change. The Iron Ridge training ground had transformed overnight. Bleachers stood in perfect rows for the visiting brass. Flags stirred faintly in the dry wind. And the recruits, every one of them, looked sharper than they ever had before. Not because they wanted to impress Sergeant Mason, but because Congressman Miller and his entourage were here to watch. Mason stalked the firing line like a wolf guarding his territory. His uniform immaculate, his tone even sharper. "Everything perfect today, people. These politicians control our budget, our equipment, and whether or not we get to keep this facility. Don't make me regret your existence." He turned to his top shooter. "Rodriguez, you're up first." The corporal smirked confidently, stepping forward like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. Behind him, Hayes stood in line with 3 other recruits, quiet, still, unnoticed. The congressman shaded his eyes. "So this is Iron Ridge, the best of the best." Colonel Hartman smiled faintly. "That's the idea, sir." Mason barked the first command. 400 meters, standard qualification, fire when ready. The air cracked. 5 perfect shots. Rodriguez lowered his weapon, glancing sideways at Hayes, smug satisfaction curling his lip. Mason nodded approval. "That's how it's done." The other recruits performed next. Some good, some average. Nothing spectacular, nothing memorable. Then Hartman stepped forward, his voice steady, carrying easily over the dry wind. "I understand, Congressman. You've been briefed on our new long-range combat protocols. We've prepared a special demonstration." He turned toward the range. "Staff Sergeant Wallace." From the far end of the bleachers, Wallace approached with 4 shooters, Hayes among them. Mason's confidence faltered. He leaned toward Hartman, his voice low and urgent. "Sir, Hayes is our weakest shot. This is a mistake." Hartman didn't even glance at him. "I've made my selection, Sergeant." The 4 shooters took their positions, each one spaced along the firing line, markers indicating distance. "These targets," Hartman explained for the congressman, "are placed at increasing ranges. The furthest is at 800 meters. A hush fell over the spectators. The Arizona wind went still. The first shooter hit at 500. The second at 650. Rodriguez, included last minute as a control, missed at 750, his frustration visible even behind his shades. Then came Hayes. Position 3, the 800-meter mark. Even Mason couldn't hide his smirk. "Should be good for a laugh," Rodriguez muttered, not quietly enough. Hayes didn't react. She adjusted her stance, her breathing, her heartbeat slowed. Wallace watched closely from the tower, and when her finger tightened on the trigger, he knew. The rifle cracked like thunder splitting stone. Silence. Then the metallic ring of a perfect center hit echoed across the valley. The congressman blinked, startled. "Outstanding," he said, rising to his feet in applause. Hartman nodded, his tone calm but his eyes sharp. "Sometimes, Sergeant, things aren't what they seem." Mason said nothing. He couldn't. His disbelief was carved into his face. Hayes stood, reassembled her gear with quiet efficiency, and returned the rifle to the rack. No celebration, no pride, just quiet precision. Behind her, the whispers began. That night, the barracks buzzed like a live wire. Every voice carried the same question. "Who is she?" When Hayes walked in, conversation stopped. All eyes turned. Rodriguez blocked her path. "You hustled us," he accused. "You've been playing this whole time." "I'm just here to train," Hayes said simply. "Bull," Rodriguez stepped closer. "Nobody goes from missing easy targets to hitting 800 meters overnight. Who are you really?" Before she could answer, Torres cut in. "She didn't miss because she couldn't hit. She missed because she chose to." The room fell silent. Rodriguez's voice hardened. "What are you saying?" Torres looked at Hayes. "I'm saying I've seen how she handles a rifle. Nobody field strips a weapon like that unless they've lived with one. She's not some rookie." Rodriguez scoffed. "Then what is she?" Before anyone could push further, a voice from the doorway broke the tension. "Hayes." Staff Sergeant Wallace stood there. "Colonel wants to see you." She followed him out into the night, leaving whispers and suspicion behind. Colonel Hartman's office was dimly lit, only a desk lamp glowing against the maps and shadows. Mason stood inside, rigid at parade rest, his jaw tight. Hartman gestured for Hayes to stand at ease. "That was quite a shot today, Private." "Thank you, sir." He looked to Mason. "Would you like to revise your assessment of Private Hayes?" Mason's lips twitched. "The private demonstrated unexpected proficiency, sir." "Indeed," Hartman's tone held a trace of humor. "Your cover is partially compromised, Hayes. That was anticipated. Tomorrow, you'll join the advanced tactical unit for the real training you came here for." Mason's head snapped toward him. "Sir." Hartman's gaze didn't waver. "Private Hayes isn't here to learn from you, Sergeant. She's here to teach." He slid a folder across the desk. Mason opened it and his face changed. The color drained. "She's a—" "That's classified," Hartman interrupted. He turned to Hayes. "Get some rest. Tomorrow gets interesting." She saluted and left, her face unreadable in the half-light. At dawn, Iron Ridge awoke to a new order. Hayes arrived at the advanced training field in different gear, stripped down, tactical, efficient. The others noticed immediately. Rodriguez, Torres, even Mason, watching her with something that wasn't quite resentment anymore. Today begins scenario-based training, Mason announced, his voice carrying across the yard. Desert extraction under hostile conditions. He hesitated. Hayes will lead Team Alpha. The words hit like a grenade. Rodriguez laughed under his breath. One lucky shot and she's in charge. Before anyone could respond, a messenger jogged over and whispered to Mason. His expression darkened. Change of plans, he barked. We've got a real-world training opportunity. 2 civilian hikers missing in Sector 4. Search and rescue, requested our help. The mood shifted instantly. This wasn't an exercise anymore. Mason divided the teams with swift precision. Hayes, Eastern Ridge, Rodriguez, Western, move out. As they geared up, Rodriguez slid past her, his voice low. Let's see how you handle something that isn't a paper target. Hayes checked her pack methodically. Focus on the mission, Corporal. Lives are at stake. The desert stretched wide and unforgiving, a cathedral of rock and silence. Hayes led her 4-person team with quiet authority. Her map folded against her wrist, compass clipped to her vest, every move deliberate, every glance purposeful. You seem to know these trails pretty well for someone who just got here, one soldier remarked. I studied the topographic maps last night, she replied. 3 potential shelter points where hikers might seek refuge. Then suddenly she raised a fist. The team froze. There, she whispered, crouching low. Barely visible footprints, uneven, deep, erratic. Someone passed through here recently, she murmured. Heavy gait, possible injury. Torres squinted. How can you tell? Hayes pointed softly. Depth, irregular spacing. Wind hasn't softened the edges yet, fresh. Rodriguez's voice crackled through her radio. Alpha Team, this is Bravo. No sign of targets in the west. Mason says rendezvous at checkpoint Delta. Negative, Hayes responded, calm and composed. We've got a trail proceeding to follow. Rodriguez's voice rose sharp. Those aren't the orders, Hayes. Tell Mason we're pursuing a lead. Alpha out. She clipped the radio back to her vest and looked at her team. If anyone wants to head to the rendezvous, do it now. No judgment, but I'm following this trail. The team exchanged looks, then Torres spoke. Lead on, Private. The ravine narrowed, its walls streaked with ancient rock and heat shimmer. Every step echoed against the silence. Hydration check, Hayes ordered. They drank carefully, efficiently. The desert will kill you faster than any enemy, she said quietly. Drink often, not too much. Torres gave her a sideways look. You sound like you've done this before. Fort Irwin, Hayes answered smoothly. 3-week desert warfare course. It was plausible, but Torres still wasn't convinced. Then a sound. Faint, broken. A cry for help. Hayes's head snapped up. Move. They found him 20 minutes later, a man pinned beneath fallen rocks, dehydrated, sunburned, delirious. My wife, he rasped. Lisa, she went for help yesterday morning. Hayes crouched beside him, assessing. Torres, start hydration protocol. Mitchell, secure the perimeter. Sanders, help me with these rocks. Her voice never rose, but people moved instantly. When she called into base, Mason's voice came back sharp. Medical evac inbound, 40 minutes. Second hiker still missing. Confirmed, sir. Continuing search. Negative. Wait for Bravo team. With respect, sir, she doesn't have that kind of time. Silence, then another voice, calm, older, resolute. Proceed, Hayes. Use your judgment. Colonel Hartman. Hayes nodded once, understood. She turned to Torres. You're in charge of extraction. If I'm not back in 90 minutes, don't come looking. You can't go alone, Torres said. I move faster alone. And then she was gone, one shadow against miles of sun and silence. The trail wound higher through broken stone, signs of passage barely visible, but Hayes read them like words. Displaced gravel, a torn strap, a faint scuff against sandstone. After 40 minutes, she spotted color, a flash of fabric against a rock outcropping. Lisa collapsed, barely breathing, skin burned red from the sun. Hayes knelt, checked vitals, applied hydration and cooling measures, created shade using her own tactical tarp. Her hands moved fast but gentle, each motion deliberate. Then the rumble. A tremor beneath her boots. She looked up, stones loosened from above, tumbling. The slope was collapsing. Without thinking, she threw herself over Lisa's body, shielding her from the fall. Dust filled her lungs. Pain flared in her arm, sharp, hot, deep, but she didn't move until the last stone fell still. When the medevac arrived 40 minutes later, both hikers were alive. Lisa unconscious. Mark awake enough to whisper, "She saved us." Mason stood at the landing zone, watching Hayes emerge from the dust, arm bandaged, uniform torn. Rodriguez approached slowly. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Hayes's answer was simple. It was necessary. You knew exactly where to look, how. Before she could answer, Hartman stepped forward. "Outstanding work today, everyone, especially you, Hayes." He turned to Rodriguez. "Corporal, I believe you owe the private an apology." Rodriguez hesitated. "I may have misjudged you." Hayes just nodded. "The hikers are safe, that's what matters." As the sun dipped behind the western ridge, the wind carried the sound of helicopters away, and with it, the last remnants of doubt. Mason's expression had changed. Rodriguez's pride had cracked. Torres looked at Hayes differently now, like someone trying to piece together a puzzle she'd already lost half of. But Hayes, she just watched the horizon, quiet, thoughtful, alone. There was something she hadn't told them. Not yet. Because sometimes the strongest soldiers are the ones who say the least. Why did she keep looking over her shoulder that morning? Because she knew the real test hadn't even begun. The rescue had changed everything. In the span of one day, Private Caroline Hayes went from the butt of every joke to the name whispered in admiration or fear. But inside, nothing had changed. Not the quiet, not the calculation. Only the mission clock ticking down in her mind. At sunrise, Iron Ridge looked almost peaceful. The storm of ridicule had passed, but the air still carried something tense, like the calm before artillery fire. Colonel Hartman stood in front of the assembled recruits, his voice calm, deliberate. "Yesterday you saw why we train, because lives don't wait for orders, lives depend on judgment." Behind him, the projector flickered on, displaying a new mission scenario. "Today," Hartman continued, "we begin the multi-day tactical exercise. 2 teams simulated hostile territory objective-based missions. Team Alpha Hayes, Team Bravo Rodriguez." A ripple of surprise ran through the ranks. Rodriguez's jaw tightened. Hayes didn't react. Hartman's gaze swept the room. "This isn't about who shoots better, it's about leadership, adaptation, survival." As the teams prepared, Rodriguez approached Hayes. His tone was tight, almost playful, but behind it the sting of pride. "No more lucky shots this time. Let's see what you're really made of." Hayes checked her weapon without looking up. "Be careful what you wish for, Corporal." The exercise began at dawn. 2 squads deployed into the wilderness, same terrain as the rescue, but this time the danger wasn't heat or dehydration. It was each other. Rodriguez led Bravo team like he led everything. Loud, aggressive, confident to the edge of reckless. Hayes led Alpha team like a shadow, soft-voiced, efficient, precise. Her commands were minimal, her hand signals clean. While Rodriguez's squad stormed objectives head-on, Hayes's group seemed to disappear. They'd vanish into the canyons, and when they re-emerged, Another red marker blinked on the command center's tactical display. By midday, Hayes's team had captured 3 objectives without losing a single simulated soldier. Rodriguez had 2 and 5 casualties. In the observation tower, Colonel Hartman and Sergeant Mason watched the feeds, each screen tracking different units. Mason's arms were crossed tight. "She's running circles around him." Hartman's response was almost a whisper, "You sound surprised." Mason hesitated. "She's good, too good. She's not just trained, she's conditioned. That's advanced Spec Ops methodology." Hartman's eyes never left the screen. "You're thinking of Ghost Protocol." Mason frowned. "That's not taught at any training facility." Hartman said nothing. He didn't have to. On the screen, Hayes's squad moved like smoke, perfectly synchronized, never visible longer than a blink. In the field, Rodriguez's frustration boiled. "Split up," he ordered. "Flank their position. I'm done playing by the book." His second-in-command hesitated. "That's not the protocol." "I don't care about protocol." Rodriguez moved alone through the brush, scanning for movement, adrenaline rising. He spotted something, a glint of glass. The edge of a scope. He crept closer, heart pounding, breath measured. And then, a tap on his shoulder. He spun around. Hayes stood behind him, calm, silent, rifle slung casually against her shoulder. "Boom," she said softly, "you're dead." For a moment Rodriguez just stared. Confusion, anger, maybe a flicker of respect. "How the hell?" "You're too focused on your target," she said evenly. "Not enough on your surroundings. This is just a game to you, isn't it?" Her expression darkened. "None of this is a game, Corporal. In the field, that mistake would cost your team their lives." She handed him a red tag, eliminated. "Take the hit, learn from it." Then she walked away. Rodriguez called after her. "Who are you really? Some kind of special forces plant sent here to make us look bad?" Hayes paused, turned slightly. "The only thing I'm here to do is my job." That night, Iron Ridge hummed with tension. Rodriguez drank alone in the mess hall, frustration burning like acid. Around him, whispers had already started. "She ghosted him. She's untouchable. She's not normal." In the barracks, Hayes sat under a dim light reviewing maps, quiet, focused, always a step ahead. Torres approached carefully, holding 2 coffee cups. "You know he's in the mess hall telling everyone you cheated." Hayes didn't look up. "He can tell them whatever makes him feel better." Torres hesitated, then sat across from her. "I looked you up in the system." Hayes's hand stopped moving, just for a heartbeat. "Oh." "Most of your files classified," Torres said softly. "Why would a recruit's file be classified?" Hayes finally looked up, her face calm, eyes unreadable. "Maybe someone in admin made a mistake." "Come on, you expect me to believe that?" Hayes returned to her maps. "Believe what you want, specialist." Torres leaned forward. "Were you covert ops, special forces?" Hayes's tone dropped almost gentle. "Does it matter?" "It matters to Rodriguez," Torres pressed. "He's planning something. I overheard him talking with his team." Hayes smiled slightly, not amused but knowing. "Good, I like a challenge." The next day dawned harder, hotter, meaner. The simulation changed. Urban warfare, mock village, civilian markers, chaos in every direction. Hartman had ordered higher difficulty, more pressure. He wanted to see what broke first, leadership or pride. Hayes moved her team through the maze of abandoned buildings like water through cracks, clear, steady, efficient. Rodriguez's squad thundered in like a storm. During a critical engagement, Rodriguez pulled a move that wasn't in the playbook, an unsanctioned flanking route through a restricted zone. When he emerged from cover, he had Hayes in his sights. He fired. Too close, too fast. Beyond the safe simulation parameters. The round cracked the wall beside her head, spraying plaster. She rolled, moved behind cover, radioed once calm, composed. That was outside parameters, Corporal. What's wrong, Hayes? Rodriguez's voice came over comms, mocking. Can't handle real pressure. Her eyes flicked upward, calm turned cold. Torres, she whispered, execute Protocol 9. Torres froze, that's. Now. And then Hayes disappeared. What happened next would be whispered about for years at Iron Ridge. For 12 minutes, Rodriguez's entire squad vanished from the tactical display one by one. No alarms, no sounds. Just red tags appearing beside their names, neutralized. When the last one blinked off, Rodriguez found himself standing alone in the dust, breathing hard, weapon trembling slightly. Hayes stepped out from behind him. Unarmed, calm, controlled. In a real fight, she said quietly, your whole team would be dead, because of your ego. He turned furious. This is bull. Before he could continue, Hartman's voice cut through the comms. All personnel returned to base immediately. Exercise terminated. Back at command, the atmosphere was tense enough to choke on. Hartman waited, hands clasped behind his back, eyes like ice. Mason stood beside him, unreadable. When everyone had assembled, Hartman spoke. What I witnessed today was a breakdown of tactical discipline. Decisions based on ego, not mission. That gets people killed. His gaze landed on Rodriguez. Consider this your warning. Then to Hayes. Private Hayes demonstrated exceptional tactical awareness and leadership under pressure. Effective immediately, she will lead the Joint Training Unit for the remainder of this program. The room erupted, whispers, disbelief, murmurs of protest. Mason stepped forward. Sir, with respect, protocol dictates. I'm aware of protocol, Sergeant, Hartman said sharply. And I'm also aware of Private Hayes's actual qualifications, which until now have remained classified. Before anyone could ask, the door burst open. A lieutenant entered, breathless, holding a message. Hartman read it quickly. His expression changed. Exercise suspended, he announced. We have a situation. The digital display flickered to a map of the desert north of Iron Ridge. Rugged mountains, canyons, no man's land. A geological survey team has gone missing in this sector, Hartman said gravely. Distress signal received 22 hours ago. Possible hostile interference. The room fell silent. This is no longer training, Hartman continued. Command has requested our unit due to proximity and specialization. His eyes landed on Hayes. Private Hayes will lead the primary extraction team. Rodriguez stood abruptly. Sir, with respect, I have seniority and more field experience. This isn't about seniority, Hartman cut him off. It's about skill set, and this mission requires her. He looked around. I need volunteers. Torres stood first. Then Rodriguez, slower this time but resolute. I volunteer, sir. Select your team, Hartman said. Wheels up in 30. Outside, the night air hummed with helicopter engines and tension. As Hayes moved through the staging area, Hartman caught her arm gently. His voice dropped low. Command believes this may be connected to the sandstone incident. For the first time, Hayes's expression changed, a flicker of recognition. Understood, sir. It's time to drop the act, Hayes. This mission needs your real skills. She nodded once, a soldier's acknowledgement. Then, without a word, she walked toward the waiting helicopter. Rodriguez watched her go, confusion mixing with something else. The uneasy realization that he had no idea who was sitting beside him anymore. When Hayes climbed aboard, the door slammed shut behind her. In the reflection of the glass, the faint glint of a medal tucked beneath her collar caught the cabin light. Not just any medal. The insignia of a Tier 1 sniper. As the rotor blades thundered against the desert sky, Staff Sergeant Wallace watched the chopper lift off from the flight line. He exhaled slowly, almost like a prayer. "She's in play," he murmured into his radio. And on the other end, Colonel Hartman's voice came back, steady, grim, certain. "Good, let's see what Ghost can do." Sometimes truth hides behind failure. Sometimes strength wears the mask of silence. But sooner or later, every ghost steps into the light. Why did she hesitate before boarding the chopper that night? Because this time it wasn't training. The desert stretched beneath them like an endless graveyard of stone and silence. The helicopter blades tore through the dark, scattering dust and heat. Inside, the squad sat wordless, 5 soldiers and 1 ghost. Hayes sat by the door, harness clipped, her gaze locked on the horizon. No chatter, no nerves, just calculation. To the others, she looked calm. Inside, her pulse was slow and steady, the rhythm of a sniper in the field. Rodriguez checked his rifle for the 3rd time. "Still think this is a wild goose chase," he muttered. Torres shot him a glare. "You said that before the rescue, too." Hayes didn't look at either of them. She was listening to the change in wind pressure, the tone of the pilot's voice, the way the desert below seemed too still. Then came the transmission. "Phantom 1, this is command. Last known signal located 5 clicks east of your current flight path. No heat signatures detected." Hayes keyed her mic. "Copy that, adjusting course." The pilot banked right, and the desert tilted beneath them. Ridges, shadows, and something that looked almost too symmetrical to be natural. Hayes leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Hold hover." She pulled down the thermal scope. Faint heat traces buried deep, shielded. Not random, structured. Her voice stayed calm. "That's not a rock formation, that's man-made." Mason's voice came over the radio, crisp and clipped from the command tent miles away. "Clarify, Hayes, you seeing structures?" "Affirmative, possible underground installation." "Mark coordinates, do not engage until confirmed." She lowered the scope, eyes flicking toward Rodriguez. "Looks like our hikers weren't the only ones out here." They landed on a flat ridge just shy of the signal. The wind howled through the canyons, cold, alive, hungry. "Form up," Hayes ordered quietly. "Silent protocol, no comms unless necessary." The team moved out, shadows among shadows. Torres led on point. Mitchell and Sanders covered flanks. Rodriguez watched the rear, still trying to figure out who exactly was giving the orders now. They moved through terrain that looked untouched by time. But then, halfway through the ravine, Torres froze. "Movement, 11 o'clock." Hayes raised a fist, signaling stop. Her eyes locked on a faint shimmer, heat distortion, not human. "Drone," she whispered. "Recon model, civilian tech modified." Rodriguez frowned. "Modified how?" "Infrared dampening. Only a few groups know that tech." "Who?" Hayes didn't answer, but in her chest an old name surfaced, one she hadn't heard in 2 years. "Phoenix Group." A private military contractor turned rogue, off the books, off the grid. She crossed them once before, barely survived it. The hikers weren't lost. They'd stumbled onto something they weren't supposed to see. The team followed the drone's patrol route until the canyon opened into a basin. Below, half buried in sand and stone, was a steel hatch. No markings, no insignia, just quiet menace. Hayes motioned for Torres, thermal scan. Torres lifted the reader, eyes widening. "There's something underneath, big, active power signatures." Rodriguez scoffed quietly. "Underground base out here, you're kidding." Hayes looked down the slope. "I don't joke about ghosts, Corporal." Before they could move, a noise cracked through the silence, mechanical, grinding. The hatch opened. A single figure stepped out, armed, armored, faceless. the kind of posture that screamed training far above mercenary grade. The soldier scanned the ridge once, raised a weapon. "Cover," Hayes shouted. The first shot shattered the rock beside them. Gunfire erupted, sharp, chaotic echoes bouncing off the canyon walls. "Contact front," Rodriguez yelled. Hayes moved instantly, controlled bursts, measured spacing, every motion deliberate. Not wild firing, not panic. Calculated counterfire. 2 more hostiles emerged from the hatch, then 4. They moved with eerie precision. "Fall back to ridge line," Hayes ordered. The team scrambled upward under suppressive fire. Rodriguez laid down rounds until his mag ran dry. "They're too coordinated. This isn't random." "I know," Hayes muttered. She switched to her scope, tracked a hostile leaning from cover. 1 breath in, 1 out. Trigger squeeze. The man dropped instantly. Torres glanced over. "That's a clean headshot at 200 meters in low light." Rodriguez froze. The realization hit him like recoil. "You're not just trained," he said quietly. "You are one of them." But Hayes didn't answer. She was already scanning for the next target. After 7 minutes of chaos, silence fell again. The hatch sealed shut. 4 hostiles down, 2 wounded, 1 still missing. "Status," Hayes called. "Mitchell grazed," Torres reported. "Everyone else good." "Good," Hayes said, voice steady. "We're pulling back. We need to regroup before they—" A voice interrupted her, soft, calm, confident. "Before we what, Captain Hayes?" She froze. The voice came from nowhere and everywhere, a radio signal hijacked on their own channel. Rodriguez looked at her, shocked. "Captain—" Hayes's pulse slowed. Her breathing didn't change, only her jaw tightened. The voice continued, smooth as glass. "It's been a long time since Sandstone. I was starting to think you'd finally quit hiding." Rodriguez mouthed silently. "Who is that?" Hayes didn't answer. The voice chuckled. Still not talking, still the same ghost. Static, then silence. For a long moment no one spoke. Only the wind moved, whistling through the canyon's hollow bones. Then Hayes exhaled slowly. "Pack up, we're leaving." Rodriguez stepped in front of her. "Not until you tell us what the hell that was." She stared at him, calm, level, unblinking. "Classified." "Classified," he snapped. "We just got ambushed by mercenaries with stealth drones and an underground base. You think classified cuts it?" Her voice sharpened but not loud. "Stand down, Corporal. That's an order." "You're not even—" He stopped when he saw the look in her eyes. Cold, hard command. That wasn't the look of a recruit. It was the look of someone who'd given real orders and lost people because of them. They hiked back in silence until the extraction point came into view, a flat plateau marked by the hum of an incoming helicopter. Mason was waiting when they landed. His expression was stone. "Report." Hayes handed him the datapad. Underground facility confirmed. Multiple hostiles, likely connected to Sandstone incident. Hartman appeared beside him, grave. "You made contact." "Affirmative, 1 transmission." Voice confirmed as Drayson. Hartman's eyes hardened. "Then it's real." Rodriguez stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, what the hell is going on?" She knew this was coming. She knew him. Hartman's gaze didn't shift. She wasn't supposed to, but yes, Hayes was part of the original Sandstone task force. Torres frowned. The classified operation from 3 years ago, the one that went dark. Hartman nodded slowly. "The same, only 1 member survived." Everyone turned to Hayes. Rodriguez whispered almost to himself, "You were the survivor." Hayes's voice was barely audible. "There were supposed to be 12 of us. Phoenix Group ambushed the convoy. Everyone else died. I walked out." Torres swallowed, and Drayson. Commanding officer turned traitor, Hartman said grimly. Sold intel, went rogue, formed Phoenix Group from what was left of our own men. Rodriguez shook his head. So this mission wasn't about hikers. Hartman's silence was the answer. That night, Iron Ridge was Iron Ridge anymore. It was a war room. Satellite feeds flickered across monitors. Analysts whispered. Mason argued quietly with Hartman, frustration written across his face. She's compromised, sir. Too personal, you know it. Hartman didn't look up. She's the only one who knows Drayson's methods. She's a ghost, not a leader. You think she'll follow command when she sees him again? Hartman's gaze hardened. She'll follow the mission. Meanwhile, Hayes sat alone outside, the desert wind brushing across her bruised skin. The stars looked too peaceful for a world this violent. Torres approached slowly, carrying a tin mug of coffee. You knew all along, didn't you? Hayes didn't answer. Torres sat beside her. What did he mean, still the same ghost? Hayes finally spoke. Call sign from before. What happened at Sandstone? She took a slow sip, eyes distant. Wrong intel, wrong command. We walked into a kill zone. Drayson sold us out, then he vanished. Torres' voice softened. And you've been hunting him ever since. Hayes didn't deny it. He used to be your commander, Torres said quietly. That's why he knows how you think. Hayes looked at the horizon, her expression unreadable. That's why I'll have to think differently. At 300, Hartman gathered the team in the operations tent. We've confirmed Phoenix Group activity in a 50-mile radius, he said. We're launching an immediate recon and sabotage mission at dawn. Hayes will lead. Rodriguez crossed his arms. And if this turns out to be a trap? Hartman's answer was simple. Then we make sure it's their last one. He looked at Hayes. You've done this before, you'll do it again. She nodded, then turned toward the open tent flap, where the night stretched wide and dark. Her voice was quiet, almost to herself. They took everything from me once. She pulled the sniper rifle strap over her shoulder. This time I'm taking it back. The desert wind carried her words away, scattering them into silence. Behind her, the base lights flickered like distant stars. Ahead, only darkness, and the faint hum of danger waiting to be found. But in that quiet, Hayes smiled faintly. Because ghosts don't fear the dark. They become it. Sometimes vengeance isn't about rage. Sometimes it's about finishing the story that never got its ending. And hers was far from over. Why did the canyon feel like a loaded breath the night before the strike? Because everyone there was holding on to something. Anger, memory, a promise, and one trigger could let it all go. They moved at dusk when the heat finally folded into shadow and the world promised mercy it rarely kept. Hayes led them, Rodriguez, Torres, Mitchell, 2 others, across a ridge that watched the valley like a hungry owl. No radios except for encrypted handoffs. No lights. Even their boots tried to be quiet. The plan was surgical. Place passive receivers, intercept command chatter, locate the command node, and take a single, clean swing at it. Disrupt. Leave, never look back. That was Hayes's rhythm, surgical, exact, disciplined. No glory, no swagger, only results. Rodriguez kept a low, impatient whisper. We could just hit them hard. Shock and awe, quick, loud, done. Hayes kept her gaze along the ridge. Shouting invites reinforcements. Precision denies them the chance. He hissed softly, not convinced. You always choose the slow burn. She let the words sit between them. For once, his anger felt small and human instead of dangerous. They split into 3 teams. Hayes and Rodriguez took the eastern approach. Torres and Mitchell flanked low to the west, and 2 others kept overwatch above. Hayes's hands moved like someone folding a map she'd memorized. She set micro-transmitters into crevices, slid a receiver under a loose stone, activated a low-wattage repeater. Each device was a whisper, not a shout. They mattered because they were invisible. At the third receiver, Rodriguez froze. He pointed to a faint trail, tracks crossing the dust. Footprints, too many, too fresh. Hayes crouched, reading the pattern. Professional marching, left foot drags carrying weight. 2 officers, 3 support, heading north at a jog. Rodriguez's mouth closed. He hadn't expected analysis. He'd expected bravado. They moved deeper. The mining facility, an old scar on the land, loomed like a wound. The satellite images Hayes had studied became real and ragged. Lights leaked through cracked panels. Machines breathed somewhere under the ribs of the earth. Torres' voice breathed in Hayes's ear through the comms. "We've picked up chatter. Encrypted, but we can triangulate command chatter to the northwest wall." Hayes nodded. "Rodriguez, west blind, keep overwatch. If things go sideways, fall back on my mark." He pushed a hand through his hair and pressed his face into the night, trying to steady the impatience that had always been his engine. They watched the valley like priests observing a sacrament. Hours stretched, then compressed. Static on the receiver broke into words, low voices, orders, a code name Hayes recognized, a call sign used in sandstone. The gut in her tightened. Sandstone, fingerprints everywhere. At 200, the movement they needed began. A convoy, 3 vehicles pulled into the wash below, headlights swallowed by the canyon. Men spilled out, fast and practiced. They moved like a single animal, feed the machine, protect the command, hustle the payload. Hayes's chest tightened at each familiar cadence. So many of these movements were familiar because she'd once taught them. Then he'd taught them back to the other side. They watched D-Sun's unit set up a perimeter. High-value cases were moved into the tunnel entrance. A commander, broad, efficient, called cadence. Hayes's throat closed. She knew that gait. It wasn't the first Drayson. It never would be. There were doubles, lookalikes, men who took the posture and the face to be useful. But one cadence was the same nobody taught. Those tiny, private signals a man lets his body betray when he thinks no one remembers. She felt that signal like a memory. Torres whispered, "I can hear him," the commander, his voice like a knife. Hayes's breath slowed, filling the hollow beneath her sternum with something that wasn't just air. A memory surfaced, one face under a flare-lit sky, voices splitting orders into fear. How they had moved wrong, how the world had folded like poor paper, how her friends had been taken piece by piece. The old ache rose like salt. For a moment her hands trembled in the dark. This was the real thing. The ghosts were not metaphors tonight. She steadied herself, hands folded around her rifle, fingers finding familiar comfort in cool metal. She copied the chatter, let patterns fall into place. D-Sun's squad planned a sweep at 300. The command node would move under the ridge shortly thereafter. That was the window. They moved on Hayes's signal. Rodriguez used the rocks as a shield and slid across a beaten bed of cracked shale. Hayes followed, methodical, a ghost who never made sound. At the edge of the perimeter she perched like a vulture above prey. Below, men heads bent to the case, laughing once, drinking, casually human, until they remembered they were mercenaries. Hayes signaled left and the small team folded into the shadows. Torres cut a silent route toward the command entrance. Mitchell looped to the northern gutter. Hayes and Rodriguez took overwatch. Everything fit together. For the first time in weeks, she felt something light and ferocious. Hope. They breached silently. Torres slipped into the dark seam where lights glowed. Her figure was a promise. Get in, tape the node, get out. But the world keeps making plans of its own. A boot scuffed, a flashlight cut like a blade. Metal clanged somewhere in the belly of the mine. The line shifted. Light at the north entrance, a voice barked, "Sweep now." Torres cursed softly. Amplified footfalls blossomed into a concert. Rodriguez's whisper was a fast heartbeat in Hayes's ear. "Back up." Hayes's mind moved in the spaces between words. Not yet. She tasted the countermove. If they pulled back too early, the node would move. If they pressed, they would meet the bulk of D-Sun's force. She counted. She felt the choice in her bones, the slow napkin of strategy versus the fast burn of heroism. One of those mercenary sentries, new jittery, not subtle, checked a shadow and shined his torch right at Torres. Hayes moved. She didn't plan the burst. She didn't rehearse the bullet. Instinct and training braided into a single motion. Her shot snapped a man to the ground before he could sound an alarm. Two more fighters spun and fired back, adrenaline and automatic reflex creating light. The night came alive with suppression and the smell of ozone. Rodriguez showered them with covering fire while Mitchell tossed a small charge that thudded into the command hatch. The explosion wasn't glorious. It was loud, necessary. It opened a dark mouth where men would be, and inside Hayes saw the silhouettes that confirmation photos had prepared her for, packs, maps, faces. She ran down the slope while gunfire stitched at the edges. The world around her moved in sharp, clean frames, Torres ducking into a beam of light and cutting a wire, Mitchell prying open a case, a voice screaming orders that made her blood quicken. The node blinked like a wounded thing. They cut the feed before the dogs of war could bark back. But then an explosion, a heavy charge not from them, from inside time to be fire and confusion. Men scattered. A figure emerged from the dust, tall, broad-shouldered, and as the smoke cleared he had a face Hayes knew in muscle memory. The same jaw, the same tight set. Not Drayson, but the posture of the man who taught him, someone who wore cruelty like a uniform. "Hayes," he said, calm and slow, and his voice found her as if it had been waiting in the stone. "You never did learn to keep your ghosts buried." The gunfire stopped as if someone had cut a string. Everyone looked. The air tasted like metal. She had to anchor herself in oxygen. For a second the world compressed. This man, the echo of sandstone, the faces that had been taken. The anger that kept Rodriguez alive flickered into something darker in her chest. Grief folded into a new hardness. "You're not him," she said, because she needed to hear it out loud over the crackle. "You're not the one who." He smiled, bitter. "Names are useful for the living. You want to shoot me, ghost? You'll have to remember why first." There was a quiet that felt like accusation. Rodriguez moved forward, fist clenched. "Which one of you is Drayson?" he demanded. "Which one traded our people for money?" The man's eyes were flat. "Drayson is a story you tell to sleep. Names change, deals change, men get paid." Torres slid beside Hayes, pistol low and ready. "We're taking you in," she said, bright and naive for the moment. "You're going to answer for this." The man laughed, not loud, just a sound like gravel. "You'll have legal hands in a week, but right now you're in my valley. This is my arrangement. Maybe you don't know how the world works, Captain." Hayes felt each word strike like wind. She had walked through a dozen war rooms where men like him rationalized slaughter with clever terms. Now he stood sealed in his own cowardice and charm. Her hand tightened on her rifle. She saw in him the justification for Sandstone, the man who had sold them out without looking back. In his eyes, she saw the faces of 12 who were dead because somebody found profit in the aftermath. Her throat burned. The line between right and need and vengeance blurred until it was at once red and black. "You walk around with their names in your teeth," she said quietly, "and then you pretend you didn't swallow them." Her voice was a shuttered window. "You let people die and then explain it away. That's not a plan, that's a choice." The man shrugged. "Choices are currency." For a heartbeat she thought she might reach for him and end it. For a heartbeat she let grief make the decision for her. Then reason rose, quick and cold. If she killed him now they'd be cut off in a valley of revenge, their intel lost, their objective meaningless. She had spent years learning how to weigh living against dead. She stepped forward instead and moved to cuff him. The man tensed, then allowed it, smug, like a man who thinks his capture is a small inconvenience. Rodriguez's breath shuddered next to her. "You okay?" he asked, quieter than the valley. "I'm better with him bound than loose," Hayes answered. Her hands worked, zip ties biting through leather, the methodical motions of someone who had learned to channel rage into restraint. "Let's get him out." They exfiltrated under the shriek of distant engines, dragging the man who smiled as if the whole thing were theater. Back at the LZ, the lights of the transport looked like a promise. The man in custody spat at the dirt as they passed. "You'll never stop what's coming," he said, venom in syllables. Hayes didn't answer. She felt old grief and new exhaustion washing together, a hard tide that left salt in the mouth. She watched Rodriguez watch the captive and wondered if he understood the depth of what had been taken from them all. In the debrief that followed, Hartman's voice was flat, precise. "We took a hit on their node. We recovered a senior operative. Intelligence will follow. You did what you had to do." Rodriguez left the tent early, jaw working. Torres stayed beside Hayes, rubbing the back of her neck with an awkward tenderness. "You looked at him and didn't just pull the trigger," she said softly. "That takes more courage than people think." Hayes let out a breath that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. "It's not courage, it's calculation." Then she allowed herself one small, honest confession. "And a debt. That man carries names I can't forgive." Later, alone, Hayes pressed her palms to her face. The canyon had given them one small victory, one captive, one disrupted node. But it had also handed her a face she couldn't forget and a reminder that the hunt would not end with arrests. It would end with choices. She sat there until dawn was a thin wash on the horizon and thought about what she would sacrifice for the end of that story. Guilt moved in the corners, because when you pull a thread on a stitched wound, you make the whole thing ache again. Hope, too, lived in that ache, a stubborn, dangerous ember. Outside, the desert inhaled the day. Somewhere far away, a man with too many faces slept. For now. Sometimes justice is patient and surgical. Sometimes it is the slow, precise taking of breath before you speak the words that send the world spinning. And sometimes, a ghost must choose whether to haunt or to forgive. Why did she wake before sunrise that morning? Because she couldn't stand another night dreaming of faces that no longer had names. The desert was quiet again, too quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't mean peace, just waiting. Outside the command tent, the horizon bled faint streaks of gold across the cold sand. Hayes stood there, boots sinking slightly, the air sharp against her skin. The mission was over on paper anyway. They'd brought back a prisoner, broken part of the Phoenix network, and returned alive. But victories like that never felt clean. They always left something behind. Usually the parts of yourself you didn't notice were missing until much later. Inside, Colonel Hartman and Sergeant Mason were already arguing. "You can't keep her in the field after that," Mason was saying, voice low but fierce. "She's compromised emotionally and operationally." "She's the only one Drayson will talk to," Hartman replied. "He won't talk to anyone. He's toying with her." Hartman looked up from the dossier spread across the table. "And that's exactly why we need her. She knows how he thinks." Hayes stepped into the tent. "He's not toying," she said evenly. "He's testing boundaries." Both men turned toward her. Mason's jaw tightened. "You should be resting." "I'm fine." "You're bleeding through your bandage." "Then I'm alive." Hartman straightened. "We've secured the prisoner in the South Module. He's requested to speak with you." Hayes blinked once. "With me?" "He called you by name." Mason crossed his arms. "This is a mistake. He'll manipulate her." Hayes didn't argue. She just said quietly, "I've been manipulated before." The interrogation chamber wasn't what movies made it look like. No mirrored glass. No flickering light bulbs. Just a single table, a camera in the corner, and air that smelled faintly of steel and dust. The Phoenix operative sat shackled, posture relaxed, a faint smirk curving his mouth. "You took your time, Captain," he said softly. Hayes sat across from him, silent. She placed a recorder on the table, pressed it once. He smiled wider. "Still by the book, even after they threw you away." Who are you really? She asked. Names are fluid, remember. You and I both live off the grid now. I'm not like you. You were once. His eyes glimmered in the low light. They called you Ghost, the sniper who disappeared after Sandstone, the one who walked out while everyone else burned. You think they ever forgave you for that? Hayes didn't flinch, but her hands tightened just slightly. I don't care who forgives me. He leaned forward. Oh, but you do. That's why you're still here. That's why you hunt. She exhaled slowly. Tell me where Drayson is. He chuckled. So predictable, always chasing the same ghost. She leaned closer, voice dropping low. You don't know what predictable is until you've seen a man beg for mercy he doesn't deserve. The smile faltered for the first time. He studied her quietly. You really believe in justice, don't you? Still clinging to that antique. Justice isn't an antique, she said. It's what keeps the world from falling apart. He tilted his head. Then maybe the world deserves to fall apart. Silence stretched. Hayes stood. You're wasting oxygen. As she turned to leave, he said softly, almost kindly. He'll come for you, you know. Not because of revenge, because of unfinished business. She paused at the door. I hope he does. That night the storm hit. Wind screamed through the canyons like something alive, tearing at tents, slamming into vehicles. The base lights flickered and died one by one, swallowed by dust and dark. Hayes stood on the flight line, wind clawing through her hair, watching the horizon pulse with lightning. Somewhere out there, beyond the ridges, beyond the storm, was Drayson. Alive, watching, waiting. Torres appeared behind her, pulling her jacket tighter against the wind. You think he's still out there? Hayes didn't look away. He's too smart to die in a storm. He'll use it. For what? Hayes's eyes narrowed. To move. And he did. At 2:17 hours, the power grid failed completely. The south module went dark. By 2:25, 2 guards were dead, clean, silent kills. The Phoenix operative was gone. Alarms tore through the night. Hayes sprinted across the compound, boots hammering gravel, flashlight beam cutting through chaos. Mason met her at the module door. He's gone, broke containment. Where? No idea, he left this. He handed her a data drive, small, black, unmarked. Hayes stared at it, a message she knew, a game. He wanted me to find this. The debrief lasted until dawn. The base felt smaller now, the kind of silence that comes after someone breaches your walls, literal or not. Hartman ran the drive through analysis. Encrypted layers, multiple firewalls, and one file name repeated through every code line. Ashlight. Mason frowned. What the hell is Ashlight? Hartman didn't answer. He looked at Hayes. You tell me. Her stomach turned. That name hadn't been spoken aloud in years. It was a contingency, she said quietly. During Sandstone, a fallback protocol if the mission went dark. Nobody ever activated it. Until now, Hartman said. Rodriguez slammed a fist against the table. So what? He's activating some old Black Ops program. What does it do? Hayes's eyes were far away. It erases evidence. Burn files, kill comms, clean house. Anyone linked to the mission disappears. Mason swore under his breath. That includes us, Torres whispered. Hayes nodded, and anyone who helped us. Hartman's tone was grave. Then we move first, before he can light the fuse. Where? Where it started, Hayes said. Sandstone. The convoy rolled out at dusk. Iron Ridge faded behind them, swallowed by dust and distance. Ahead, the broken remains of the Sandstone site, half buried in the desert. To most people, it was a forgotten relic. To Hayes, it was a scar. The closer they got, the more she felt it, the phantom weight of memory pressing against her chest. The night Sandstone fell still lived inside her. The screams, the comms cutting out, the betrayal. Rodriguez drove the lead vehicle. "I don't get it," he said. "Why come back here?" "Because he wants me to," Hayes said softly. "And because I want answers." Torres frowned. "What if it's a trap?" Hayes smiled faintly. "It is." They arrived just before midnight. The old compound was barely standing. Cracked concrete, collapsed roofs, fences twisted by wind. "Hard to believe this was once top secret," Rodriguez muttered. Hayes stepped through the broken gate, her flashlight cutting through the dark. "Secrets don't disappear," she said. "They just change hands." They moved inside the main hangar. Dust drifted like ghosts through the beam of light. Then a sound. Soft, metallic. A single clap echoed through the hall. "Welcome home, Ghost." Drayson stepped out from the shadows. He looked older but not weaker. His eyes still carried that calm, analytical sharpness, the kind of intelligence that made you trust him before you realized you shouldn't. Hayes didn't move, didn't speak. He spread his arms. "You've been chasing me for 2 years. You should have known I'd stop running." "You didn't stop," she said. "You circled back." He smiled faintly. "Same thing." Torres raised her weapon, hands where I can see them. Drayson didn't even glance her way. His eyes stayed on Hayes. "Still leading from the shadows," he said softly. "Still pretending you don't enjoy the power that comes with it." "Where's the rest of your team?" Hayes asked. "Scattered, dead, or smarter than us." "You triggered Ashlight." "Of course I did. You left me no choice." Hayes's tone was ice. "You sold us out for money." He shook his head. "I sold us out for freedom. Do you know what happens to soldiers like us when the wars end, Caroline? We get buried under medals and silence. You think the system forgives ghosts?" "I didn't need forgiveness," she said. "I needed truth." "And what did it give you?" "Nothing." "Exactly," he said. "That's the point. They built us to fight shadows and then blamed us for the darkness." Rodriguez muttered, "You sound like a manifesto." Drayson smiled. "Maybe I am one." He stepped closer. Hayes didn't raise her rifle. She wanted to, but she couldn't. Every nerve screamed at her, but part of her still remembered him as her commanding officer, the man who taught her how to breathe before a shot. "You think this is redemption?" she asked. "Killing everyone linked to Sandstone?" "This is closure," he said simply. "Closure doesn't come from burning the world." "No," he said. "It comes from surviving what's left." The air between them crackled, not with gunfire, but with something colder. Two ghosts facing each other across the grave they'd both helped dig. Then quietly Hayes said, "You should have stayed buried." She raised her rifle, slow, steady, deliberate. Drayson smiled, not mocking this time but almost proud. "I always knew you'd outlive me." A red dot bloomed across his chest before anyone else fired. "Not hers." Tor's voice broke the silence. "Sniper, East Ridge." Gunfire exploded. Hayes dove for cover, dragging Torres down with her. Rodriguez returned fire, shouting over the chaos. "They've got the high ground." Hayes crawled to the window, sighted the ridge, and froze. The shooter was Phoenix. He was Iron Ridge. One of their own. "Command is compromised," Hayes shouted into her mic. "Repeat, Iron Ridge has been breached." Static answered her. The firefight raged for minutes that felt like hours. When it ended, Drayson was gone, vanished into smoke and dust, like the desert had swallowed him whole. Hayes stood among the wreckage, chest heaving, eyes burning. Torres touched her arm gently. "You could have killed him." "I tried," Hayes said softly. "He wasn't alone." "What now?" Hayes looked at the empty horizon. "Now we stop Ashlight." Rodriguez stepped forward, "Even if that means going against command." Hayes met his gaze, steady, cold, certain. "Especially if it does. Sometimes loyalty isn't about who you follow. It's about who you refuse to betray." And sometimes the most dangerous orders are the ones you choose to disobey. Why did the base feel emptier when they returned? Because ghosts had already moved in. Iron Ridge was supposed to be home ground, their sanctuary, their shield. Now it felt like a trap. When the convoy rolled through the gates, the guards didn't salute. The watchtower lights didn't sweep. The silence wasn't peace anymore, it was warning. Hayes stepped out first, boots crunching over gravel that seemed too loud in the stillness. Torres and Rodriguez followed, scanning rooftops, hands hovering near triggers. "Where is everyone?" Rodriguez whispered. Hayes didn't answer. Her eyes swept the compound, her instincts screaming the truth before her mind could form it. They weren't alone. Inside the operations tent, the air smelled of ozone and sweat, not fear but anticipation. Someone had been here, recently. Then the comm crackled, a familiar voice calm as ever. "Welcome back, Captain." "Hartman." Hayes froze. "Sir, where's Sergeant Mason? Where's the rest of the unit?" A pause, then. "Right where they need to be." Rodriguez tensed. That didn't sound right. Hayes keyed the comm again. "We were ambushed at Sandstone. Phoenix Group had insider intel. Someone fed them our coordinates." "I know," Hartman replied, "because I authorized it." The world went quiet. Rodriguez's face hardened. "He's lying." Hayes shook her head, slow, hollow. "No, he's not." The loudspeaker flared to life, Hartman's voice echoing across the base. "You were meant to lead us here, Hayes. Drayson wanted Ashlight activated. I wanted to know who could do it. Turns out it's you." Torres whispered, "He played us." "Played everyone," Hayes said quietly. Then came the floodlights, blinding, snapping to life across the compound. Soldiers emerged from barracks, from hangars, from shadows. Iron Ridge uniforms their own, but weapons raised. Rodriguez's voice was thick with disbelief. "Our people." Hayes's tone was steel. "Not anymore." Mason appeared from the far side of the runway. His face was older, heavier, shadowed by regret. "Stand down, Hayes," he called. "You don't know what you're walking into." She stared back. "You knew." He didn't deny it. "We all did. The mission's bigger than one ghost." Rodriguez spat. "Mission? You sold us out to a private warlord." Mason's voice was tired. "You think command cares about morality. Drayson's group isn't the enemy, it's the next evolution. We adapt or we die." Hayes's voice was low but sharp enough to cut glass. "You already died, Sergeant. You just haven't buried yourself yet." The gunfire started without warning. A single shot, then chaos. Hayes dove for cover, dragging Torres behind a sandbag wall. Rodriguez returned fire, short, controlled bursts. The night turned white with muzzle flashes. Hayes shouted over the roar, "We can't hold this position. Fall back to the motor pool." They sprinted through the chaos, explosions blooming in the dark, alarms blaring across Iron Ridge. The world they'd trained in was burning itself alive. Inside the motor pool, they barricaded the doors. Engines rumbled faintly, some vehicles still fueled, still operational. Torres collapsed against the wall, breath ragged. "We can't fight all of them." Hayes crouched beside her, loading another mag. "We're not going to fight all of them. We're going to find Hartman." Rodriguez shook his head. "You're thinking of killing him." She looked at him flatly. "No, I'm thinking of ending this." He grabbed her wrist. "Hayes, stop, look at me." For the first time, she did. Rodriguez's voice softened. "You're not the same person you were at Sandstone. You're not a weapon anymore." Her voice cracked, the first crack since the beginning. "Then what am I, Rodriguez? Tell me, because all I see are people dying because of me." Torres looked up. "That's not true." "It is," Hayes whispered. "Every mission, every order, every ghost I carry." Silence. Then the far door rattled, gunfire chewing through metal. Rodriguez grabbed the ignition key from the nearest armored truck. We're out of time. Hayes nodded once. Drive. They broke through the gate, tires spitting dirt, bullets sparking against armor. The desert swallowed them whole. Inside the vehicle, everything pulsed, headlights flickering, hearts pounding. Hayes stared through the windshield, face unreadable. Torres turned to her. If Hartman's working with Drayson, why lure you back here? Hayes exhaled slowly. Because Ashlight wasn't a file, it was a failsafe, a cleanup operation. Cleanup. Every mission, every soldier, every record tied to Sandstone, including me. Rodriguez frowned. He's trying to erase you. Hayes nodded, and everyone who remembers. The radio buzzed again, Hartman's voice, faint through static. You can't stop it, Hayes. You were the trigger, not the target. The code's already live. Hayes slammed her fist against the dash. Damn it. Torres leaned forward. What code? What does it do? Hayes's voice dropped to a whisper. Detonation protocol. All field assets. The system wipes the evidence by wiping the people. Rodriguez cursed. We've got to shut it down. Exactly. She pointed ahead. North Ridge Relay Tower. It's the control hub. We cut power there, we stop Ashlight before it cascades. Rodriguez tightened his grip on the wheel. Then hold on. The truck tore across the desert, headlights slicing through dust. Behind them, Iron Ridge burned like a dying sun. At the relay tower, they abandoned the truck and climbed. Wind screamed through metal scaffolding, and lightning split the horizon. Hayes reached the console, old, patched, still humming with stolen power. She ripped open the access panel, fingers moving with desperate precision. Torres watched her. You know what you're doing. Not really, Hayes muttered, but he trained me well enough to improvise. The console flickered, a red warning blinking. ASHLIGHT initiated. 2 minutes, Rodriguez shouted. Hayes pulled cables, bypass circuits, rerouted voltage. Sparks jumped, burning her sleeve. Come on, come on. Then static. A voice on the intercom. Drayson. You still think you can undo what we built, Caroline? Her hands didn't stop moving. I'm not undoing it, I'm rewriting it. He laughed softly, still the idealist. Still the survivor. The countdown dropped. 00, 45, 00, 30, 00, 20. Hayes, Torres shouted, it's going to blow. Then you two get clear. No way in hell, Rodriguez snapped. Hayes's eyes locked on the circuit core. A thought flickered. She reached for her dog tags, pulled the metal free, and jammed them between 2 terminals, bridging the ground. The console screamed, power surged. The tower lit up in white fire, then went black. Silence. Then slowly the wind returned. The warning lights were gone. The timer froze at 00:07. Rodriguez exhaled hard, leaning against the rail. You did it. Hayes stared at the console, smoke rising from the melted metal. I stopped it. Torres smiled weakly. Then we won. Hayes shook her head. Not yet. She held up her comm, still crackling faintly with Hartman's voice. Command still thinks we're dead, which means we have one advantage left. Rodriguez's voice was rough. And what's that? She looked at him, eyes cold and resolute. Ghosts can move where the living can't. They descended the tower as the first light of dawn touched the desert. Behind them, Iron Ridge burned quietly. Ahead, only open land, endless, uncertain. Torres limped slightly, exhaustion catching up. Where do we go now? Hayes adjusted her pack, watching the sun rise over the sand. We go hunting. For Drayson. For everyone who built him. Rodriguez gave a humorless laugh. That's a long list. Hayes nodded once. Then we'll start with the ones who thought they erased us. They reached the ridge. Below, smoke still curled from the base, a scar on the landscape, a grave for everything they'd been. Hayes stopped and looked back one last time. I trained to defend the system, she said softly, but maybe the system's what needs defending from itself. Rodriguez put a hand on her shoulder. What you did back there, that wasn't orders, that was choice. She turned her head slightly, meeting his gaze. Yeah, and that's what scares them. As they walked into the open desert, the camera of the story panned wide, small silhouettes moving through endless gold and wind. The radio crackled once more, faint, almost ghostly. Hartman's voice filtered, broken but alive. You can run, Hayes, but ghosts always come home. She didn't answer. She simply clicked the radio off and kept walking. Sometimes survival isn't victory. Sometimes it's the beginning of another war, the kind fought in silence, against the things that wear your own uniform. And sometimes the only way to win is to become the story they can't erase. Why did she stop when the wind changed direction? Because even the desert seemed to hold its breath. They had been walking for days, no map, no signal, no orders, only purpose. The three of them moved like shadows across an endless expanse of gold and ruin. The mission wasn't written anywhere now. It lived only in their footsteps. Hayes carried the silence like armor. Torres carried the hope. Rodriguez carried the doubt. But all three carried the truth, the kind that doesn't fade when the gunfire stops. By the fifth dawn, they reached the coordinates buried inside the stolen Phoenix Drive, a dead zone somewhere between official borders, a place that didn't exist on maps. In the distance, half buried in sand, stood what looked like an abandoned satellite station. Torres exhaled. That's it. Rodriguez adjusted his rifle. That's the kind of place bad men keep worse secrets. Hayes said nothing. They approached cautiously, the wind whispering against the metal husk. Signs of movement, tracks, tire grooves, faint heat signatures under the surface. Sublevel entry, Hayes murmured, buried under the main array. Torres frowned. How do you know? Hayes's voice was quiet. Because I helped design it. Rodriguez froze. You what? It was part of sandstone. Phoenix just built on top of the bones. And then, as if her words had summoned it, the ground hummed. A low mechanical sound vibrated through the sand, deep, deliberate. The panel of the old communications dish shifted, revealing a concealed freight lift. Rodriguez whispered, "They're still here." Hayes nodded. "Then so are we." The elevator descended into the earth, swallowing them in red light. No words, just breath, the sound of hearts pretending not to be afraid. At the bottom, silence, a corridor of reinforced steel and humming servers. Walls flickered with projection screens showing encrypted feeds, satellite movements, drone telemetry, coded broadcasts. Torres whispered, "How many people do you think are down here?" Hayes's reply was soft, enough to erase a country. They moved through the maze, every step deliberate. Hayes led, scanning corners, checking reflections. She moved like she'd been here before, because in a way she had. At the final door, she stopped. The retinal scanner glowed faintly red. Rodriguez muttered, "Please tell me you can bypass that." Hayes leaned in, reached into her vest pocket, pulled out a contact lens case. "Drayson's left eye pattern," she said quietly, "from the sandstone files." Torres blinked. "You've been planning this." Hayes's lips curved faintly. "No, I've been preparing for it." The door clicked open. Inside was a war room disguised as a command center. Servers lined the walls, cables snaking like veins. At the center, a holographic map showing global nodes pulsing red, each one labeled ASHLIGHT active. And standing beside it, Drayson. He looked the same as before, maybe calmer, like a man watching the tide come in. "I knew you'd come," he said softly. Hayes's rifle stayed raised. "Shut it down." "I can't." "Then I will." He shook his head. "No, Ghost, you don't understand. You already did." Torres frowned. "What's he talking about?" Drayson's eyes flicked to the map. When you disabled the relay, the system rerouted control to its core. Here, it can't be undone. The only way to stop Ashlight now, he paused, is to kill it at the source. Rodriguez's voice was sharp. Then do it. Drayson smiled faintly. You don't kill something like Ashlight, you bury it. And to bury it, you have to stay buried. Hayes stepped closer, rifle steady. What are you saying? He looked at her not like an enemy, but like an echo. You know what I'm saying. You were built for this. Behind them, another voice cut through the tension. Calm, cold, commanding. Stand down, Hayes. They turned. Colonel Hartman stood in the doorway, flanked by armed soldiers. His uniform was immaculate, but his eyes were hollow. I told you, he said, ghosts always come home. Rodriguez lifted his rifle. You son of a... Hayes raised a hand. Don't. Hartman took a slow step forward. You were never supposed to find this place. You were supposed to die at Iron Ridge. Then you underestimated me, Hayes said. No, Hartman replied. I overestimated your faith in the system. He gestured toward the map. This is bigger than Phoenix, bigger than Sandstone. Ashlight is global deterrence, the failsafe for a dying world. One code and the slate wipes clean. Rodriguez snapped. By murdering soldiers, civilians, anyone in the chain. Hartman's expression didn't change. By ensuring control, chaos kills more. Hayes took a step forward. You've become the thing you swore to stop. Hartman's gaze hardened. We became what we had to, because order demands sacrifice. Order isn't control, Hayes said quietly. It's trust. You lost that the day you buried the truth. Drayson spoke again, almost to himself. You see now, don't you, Caroline? We were both just tools, two sides of the same broken coin. Hayes's rifle wavered for just a second, caught between them. Drayson, Hartman, mentor and betrayer, both men convinced they were saving something worth saving. Torres whispered, Hayes, what do we do? Hayes's voice came slow, deliberate. We end it. Hartman raised his weapon. You won't make it out alive. She nodded once. I never planned to. The gunfire erupted in a flash. Hartman's guards opened fire. Rodriguez hit the ground, firing back. Torres took position behind a console, returning precision bursts. Hayes moved not fast, not reckless, controlled chaos. Every motion fluid, rehearsed, inevitable. Drayson took a round to the shoulder, fell behind the server rack, blood slicking down his arm. Hartman retreated toward the map console, shouting orders that no one followed anymore. Hayes reloaded, sprinted forward through smoke and sparks, and dove behind cover. Torres shouted, they're flanking left. Rodriguez covered her, shouting over the din, Go Hayes, go. She didn't hesitate. Hayes vaulted the central table and tackled Hartman as the last guard fell. They crashed against the console, sparks flying. Hartman struggled, old reflexes clashing with guilt and fury. You think you're saving them, he snarled. You're condemning them to chaos. She gritted her teeth. Maybe chaos is better than your order. He reached for his sidearm. She stopped him. A single, silent motion. Final. When she stood, the command center was quiet again. Only the hum of servers remained, and the faint, labored breathing of Drayson, slumped against the wall. He looked up at her. You did it. She said nothing. You always do. Hayes looked at the central console. The map still glowed red. She approached slowly, her reflection trembling in the glass. Torres limped over. Can we shut it down? Hayes's voice was barely above a whisper. No, but we can bury it. She began typing commands, overriding safety protocols, rerouting the core power to the backup coolant systems. Rodriguez stared. What are you doing? Setting it to overload. If this place burns, so does Ashlight. Torres' eyes widened. You'll never get out in time. Hayes smiled faintly. I know. Rodriguez grabbed her shoulder. No, we're not leaving you. She looked at him steady, calm, resolved. You are, both of you. Someone has to tell the world what really happened here. Otherwise, this all just happens again. Torres shook her head, tears streaking her face. You don't have to die to prove something. Hayes's voice softened. I'm not dying to prove, I'm dying to stop. She pressed the final key. A deep rumble filled the room, the heartbeat of something ancient waking up. She handed Torres her tags. Find the recordings, expose the files, make them listen. Torres sobbed, Caroline. But Hayes only smiled. Go. Rodriguez stared one last time at the woman who had come to this place mocked, doubted, forgotten, and now stood as the last defender of what was left of their humanity. He saluted her, a small, trembling gesture, and pulled Torres toward the exit. When they were gone, Hayes turned toward Drayson. He looked at her through fatting eyes. You win, Ghost. No, she said quietly, nobody wins. She walked to the center of the room, pressed her palm against the glowing console. The system recognized her heartbeat. User override confirmed. Core detonation in 60 seconds. The lights turned white. Hayes exhaled slow, calm. She thought of Sandstone, of faces, of laughter in the barracks, of a drill instructor who once mocked her before seeing the medal around her neck. She thought of what dignity really was. Not pride, not defiance, just the quiet act of doing what needed to be done, even when no one would ever know. And as the world began to burn around her, she whispered, almost to herself, sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The light swallowed her. Above ground, miles away, the desert cracked open with a single, silent bloom of light. No shockwave, no echo, just a shimmer that faded into the morning. Rodriguez and Torres watched from a distant ridge, eyes wet, breath caught. Rodriguez whispered, she did it. Torres wiped her face, she finished it. The horizon glowed faintly gold, as if the desert itself was remembering her. Weeks later, the story began to spread. A classified base erased, a rogue operation exposed. And somewhere in the dark corners of intelligence networks, a new file appeared. Operation Phantom, status complete. The world would never know her name. But in the places where soldiers whisper legends in dusty tents, in mess halls, in the lonely spaces between missions, they would speak of her. The sniper who walked into hell and never came back. The ghost who stopped the fire. And sometimes, when the desert wind blew just right, it carried her name in a whisper no one could quite make out. Because some stories don't end with glory. They end with peace. And some heroes don't come home. They become home. For every soul who still believes courage means doing what's right, even when it costs you everything.